Disclaimer, I'm a law student, and the legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. Alright, so let's get on to reviewing some content put out by some unsavory individuals, or, you know, people who we probably all heard of at some point or another, but we'll put out some stuff that it's good to talk about. So, hey, it's Rose again. How about it? So, Rose of Dawn recently put out a video, alright? This video is called Rowling Rage and Non-Binary Dating Nonsense. Trans Stupid. Very catchy title. Very edgy. I can almost feel myself getting cut on that edge. Yeah. So, we'll get to Calvin in a little bit. Actually, I have a bit more nuance of a discussion to have about him, and that'll be relevant then. But yeah, so I've given a glance over this video, and I've done some research to prepare. So effectively, this video is sort of in two parts, right? The second part I really don't care about, because it's literally just like her cringing at people who are gender non-conforming, complaining about like having life be a little hard to, about how life is a little hard to find people who find them attractive. Shocker, right? There's really no argument there. It's literally just like her cringing at people who she finds cringy. I don't know. But the first half of this actually had some arguments, so I would like to talk about it. So let's go ahead and get on with the going on. At least 1.5 speed, because I'm not listening to this at normal.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Transphobia, the show where I take a look at the wonderful world of LGBTQIA+++ news, because stupidity is intersectional. It's been a very long time since I said that. I know that I've taken a little bit of a break on my channel, but over the last couple of weeks, we've seen an awful lot of quite bizarre news coming out of the LGBTQIA+ numbers community, and I think this is...
I always love, like, the LGBTQIA+ numbers, etc., etc. I don't know. It just always makes me laugh when these people put it out. Not, like, seriously, but kind of, like, ironically that they think that's, like, a jab or whatever. But whatever. Let's go on.
Probably the best format to really address a lot of what's going on. Now, I'm going to start this week by talking about the main story across the entire year from the looks of things, due to the amount of coverage this one person has received. I mean, just look at Pink News. I'm sure that ContraPoints would say they had a cringe obsession with this particular person, but, you know, maybe she's just selective in her outrage. But this...
I can taste the salt from here! Damn, Rose, be salty. That's really all I gotta say about it.
Of course, is J.K. Rowling. Now, I have done a video expressly on Rowling.
Also, yeah, mind you, J.K. Rowling just put out another tweet with some studies, and I'll probably have to take a look at them and talk about them in another video, but we're just going to focus on this for right now. God, J.K. Rowling, what are you doing? Stop tweeting. You're ruining my childhood.
In the past, where I discussed how I didn't find anything that she's really been doing to be particularly transphobic. I know there's a lot of people within the trans community, however, that very, very strongly disagree, but each to their own. I personally think she has done absolutely nothing wrong. But there has been so much outrage about everything to do with Rowling, and it really seems to be having an impact not just on her, but on just people who generally agree with her. Now, over a week ago, Insider reported on a best-selling children's author being sacked by her publishers after tweeting her support for J.K. Rowling. Now, what was the support that she actually did? Well, it was just retweeting something that my friend Fiona Lanta tweeted about, with the hashtag #IStandWithJK J.K. Rowling.
So I want to talk about this for a second, right? There's not really too much, like, I have my research document, but this doesn't necessarily require that at this point. Like, I want to be clear with people. The way that she's phrasing this, the way that she's framing this, is that tweeting this out, tweeting hashtag #IStandWithJK Rowling, is just, you know, an innocent little... It's just an innocent tweet, right? It's just saying that you're standing with your favorite author, you know. Of course, they aren't going to specify, like, the reason that they're standing with them or the issues of which they're supporting them. But it's just... I mean, you see what they're doing here, right? You see what she's doing here, right? Like, she's literally just trying to phrase this in such a way that omits, like, all of the other baggage that comes with literally supporting someone who has gone on, like, giant tirades against trans people. Literally today, like, 4 hours ago or something, like, just... Literally earlier today, she put out another string of tweets, like doubling and tripling down on her position. It's not like this is just someone who's completely apolitical, just voicing her opinions. We'll talk about that argument in a little bit, right? or soon. I can't remember when she brings it up. She brings it up at another point in this video very explicitly. But I think to say that, like, to analogize, right? If you were to go out, all right, and to tweet your support about, like, Richard Spencer, and you tweeted about how, you know, I just think that Richard Spencer just has, like, completely reasonable, completely objective views. I just think he gets a lot of heat from a lot of people, and yeah, I just want to tweet my support for him. You know what you're doing. You know. So I don't feel too much, like, I don't feel too much sympathy for this person losing their job. It sounds pretty reasonable for a publisher to have done this.
That was it. But in this wonderful world of 2020, this is enough to get somebody cancelled. And this is why I really want to talk about this. According to Insider, Gillian Phillips, a Glasgow-born best-selling children's author, has been sacked from her job as one of several writers who write under the pen name Erin Hunter. Her removal from the team that writes animal fantasy series, including Warrior Cats, Survivors, and Bravelands, comes after she tweeted her support to J.K. Rowling after the Harry Potter author's controversial comments about trans people. Phillips tweeted, #IStandWithRowling on the 7th of June. In a statement on Sunday night following the decision to remove her by publication companies HarperCollins and Working Partners, Phillips wrote, "I am disappointed that the hard work and professional attitude I've brought to my work for HarperCollins and for Working Partners counted for nothing in the face of an abusive mob."
Well, she mentioned that J.K. Rowling threatened to sue a website which said that her views on trans people are harmful. Wow, such free speech. No, of course she won't. I can almost guarantee that she won't, right? Like, of course she wouldn't, because that would just, you know, kind of, like, just casually fly in the face of her entire argument, right? Just, like, casually maybe, like, make her out to be, like, a little bit of a hypocrite, but, you know, what's my opinion? What's my take on this? I'm just a casual, you know, small time, like, C-rank internet personality. You know, what does my opinion matter?
Of anonymous Twitter trolls. It is concerning that my concerns about women's legal rights and spaces have been presented as transphobia, and this is an accusation that has been allowed to stand by my former employers. Working Partners has received numerous tweets from angry fans calling for them to fire Phillip. Eventually she was. Chris Snowden, the managing director of the company, said in a statement, "Erin Hunter is not a single person, but a diverse team of creatives and writers. We recently became aware that Gillian Phillip had associated the Erin Hunter pen name with her personal views on Twitter, thus associating them with a whole collective. In light of this situation, a decision was taken to no longer work with Gillian Phillip. The decision taken was not in direct response to the nature of Gillian's personally expressed views." Now, they say that this was connected to this particular pen name of Erin Hunter, but the tweet in question clearly is under Gillian Phillips' own name. So it's quite difficult for them to really make the argument that this is being represented as their entire brand, when it's clearly just one person expressing their view. Now, this...
Hold on. I mean, that makes a decent amount of sense, right? Like, if you're working for a brand or for a company, and you go out, and you tweet some racist shit, or some sexist shit, or some otherwise bigoted shit, right? Even if it's not directly stated, but, like, that you're supporting someone who is very openly bigoted and openly expresses views which you are, you know, adopting and supporting, right? It doesn't exactly help the brand, right? It doesn't exactly help the brand whenever people start thinking of the brand, they start associating it with someone who's fucking transphobic or homophobic or racist or misogynist or whatever it is, right? So I would say that makes sense.
This is important to talk about, because when we're hearing from the likes of AOC and Owen Jones and all the woke progressives that cancel culture doesn't exist and it's just the privileged trying to defend their views from being held to account. Someone like...
They always gotta talk about AOC, right? This is why, like, whenever these trans people, right, like, especially, like, her, Blair White, trans bra, like, all these people, right, they try to come off as, like, apolitical or libertarian or whatever. Actually, I don't know if they're libertarian, right? But, like, whenever they, like, just casually throw in a reference to, like, AOC, like, even though, mind you, this person isn't involved in American politics. Like, she lives over in the UK. Like, AOC really doesn't matter to her. But, you know, she just has to try and say shit about her. Because,
Like Gillian Phillip is a fairly small name. I certainly hadn't heard of her before all of this happened. And yet she still was removed from her job just for tweeting in support of Rowling. That should concern a lot of people, on either side, really. This is someone just expressing a view. She hasn't said anything particularly transphobic. She's not calling trans women men, for example. She's not calling for abuse. She's not doing anything the likes that we've seen being aimed at J.K. Rowling herself, and yet she was still removed from her job just for expressing that view.
Okay, hold on. We have a couple of arguments to address, all right? 2, actually, to be exact. So let's talk about some issues, all right? So there's really 2 different arguments to be addressing here, right? This is the updated, by the way, for people who aren't aware, this is the updated research document. If you want to access it, go to my Twitter. You'll find a link in, like, the website link that's there. So Rose just inadvertently made 2 arguments there. The first went to whether or not you can hold someone against or hold against someone having an opinion, right? Or whether or not someone having an opinion which is contrary to yours in and of itself makes that opinion worth respecting and also not worth holding against them, right? That's the first argument. The second argument goes to what is the definition of transphobia, and she seems to inherently define it as either misgendering a trans person or causing them harm, right? Like, she specifically goes out of her way to, like, make it about causing harm, right? So I want to address both of these in turn, all right? So first, is someone just expressing an opinion reason in and of itself to respect that person's opinion? Let's chat about it. According to the Supreme Court in Brandenburg v. Ohio, right, this is the United States court precedent on this particular subject, it's important to recognize a couple things about free speech. And mind you, yes, this person, we're talking about Rose, and she's over in the UK and all that, but this has some deeper philosophical discussions, so we'll get there, right? First, the First Amendment does not give anyone a complete, unabridged freedom to say whatever they want. There are limits, right? A lot of people just assume freedom of speech means that you can say whatever you want without any recourse, but that's just not true. And one of those limits is when people make specific and actionable statements intended to incite harm against a specific group of people. Particularly, so like, for example, what you cannot do is say to another group of people, hey, we're going to go lynch Bob or persons A, B, and C at X place and Y time, right? You cannot say that because it is specifically actionable hate speech. But if hate speech is not prohibited, for example, if it's very general, if you have like the KKK going out and like just generally voicing their opinion about like how they don't like black people, then the current opinion of the court is to have the remedy be other speech criticizing the original hate speech. This has to do with John Stuart Mill's concept of the free marketplace of ideas, right? The idea that like if you are voicing an opinion in public and it's not specifically actionable hate speech, then other people have the right to be able to address that speech with their own speech, sometimes in overwhelming numbers, right? I mean, that's just the free marketplace taking over after all, which is so weird since conservatives love using that as a justification for having platforms in the first place, but can't take any criticisms themselves. So with this in mind, let's talk about some hypotheticals. All right? If a misogynist believes a woman's place is in the kitchen, and I do not, does the fact that we disagree mean that misogyny is okay? Or that this person's opinion should be respected? Or, let's take it another way, if a racist believes in slavery and I do not, does the fact that we disagree mean that opinion is respectable? Or, let's just take it all the fucking way, if a Nazi believes we should kill all the Jews and I do not, does the fact that we disagree in and of itself mean that their opinion is okay and respectable? And the answer is, of course not. The reason all of these people are wrong is not because we disagree, but because they are openly advocating for materially adverse treatment of these people. And pursuant to the logic of John Stuart Mill in the Supreme Court, the correct response to people voicing these opinions is for other people to openly criticize those opinions in the free marketplace of ideas. So no, just expressing an opinion is not reason enough in and of itself to respect someone's opinion, period. So let's kick that argument to the side, all right? That's just complete bullshit, right? The fact that she's just voicing an opinion, just expressing her opinion, that does not mean that she's afforded protection or respect for whatever that opinion is, if it still is otherwise bigoted. Which brings us to the second argument. Specifically about whether or not it was bigoted, right? Is tweeting hashtag I stand with J.K. Rowling in and of itself transphobic? Well, let's talk about the definition of transphobia, and specifically if it's limited to just physical violence, since that seems to be what Rose mainly made it about. According to Merriam-Webster, transphobia is defined as an irrational fear or aversion or discrimination against transgender people, all right? According to dictionary.com, transphobia is defined as unreasoning hostility, aversion, etc. towards transgender people. According to lexico.com, transphobia is defined as dislike of or prejudice against transsexual or transgender people. Mind you, that's not misgendering. That's not violence. It's prejudice or dislike. That's a pretty broad category. According to Wikipedia, transphobia encompasses a range of negative attitudes, feelings, or actions towards transgender people or transness in general. Transphobia can include fear, aversion, hatred, violence, anger, or discomfort felt or expressed towards people who do not conform to social gender expectations. It is often expressed alongside homophobic views, and hence is also often considered an aspect of homophobia. Transphobia is a type of prejudice and discrimination, similar to racism and sexism, and transgender people of color are often subjected to all three forms of discrimination at once. So let's be clear, at least based on this definition, we have a lot more definitions to go through. Transphobia is not just like misgendering or violence, all right? Let's be clear. According to Planned Parenthood, transphobia is defined as the fear, hatred, disbelief, or mistrust of people who are transgender, thought to be transgender, or whose gender expression doesn't conform to traditional gender roles. They go on to discuss how transphobia can take on many forms, including negative attitudes and beliefs, aversion to and prejudice against transgender people, irrational fear and misunderstanding, disbelief or discounting preferred pronouns or gender identity. That's a very important one. I want to say that again just so that it can get through, if Rose ever watches, so I can get through her head. Transphobia can also be defined as disbelief or discounting preferred pronouns or gender identity. How you feel about non-binary people, Rose? You cool with their gender identity? You cool with it? Last time I checked, you had some pretty yikesy opinions on them. Might be some transphobia there. Just saying. Derogatory language and name-calling, bullying, abuse, and even violence. Furthermore, according to collinsdictionary.com, transphobia is defined as fear or hatred of transgender people. According to Macmillan Dictionary, transphobia is defined as prejudice towards or unfair treatment of transgender people. And lastly, according to Cambridge Dictionary, transphobia is defined as a fear or dislike of transgender people. We've seen that definition a lot, right? Like over and over. It's not like very specific actions. It's a fear or dislike of trans people. You're damn right, Black trans lives matter. You're absolutely fucking right in saying that. So let's be clear. Not one reputable definition of transphobia is reduced down to inflicting physical harm. And various definitions often encompass a variety of actions and beliefs which have a materially negative effect on the lives of trans people by virtue that they are trans. So no, transphobia is not limited to just physical violence. So let's be clear, all right? This person that we're talking about, this person who tweeted out support for J.K. Rowling, right? Let's be clear. First, the fact that they were just expressing their opinion does not in and of itself give them the authority or the ability to be able to say that without any recourse. If it is otherwise bigoted or suggestive of bigoted beliefs, then that should still be accounted for, and that should still be regarded and treated in the same way that other hate speech is treated in society, right? So there's that. Secondly, and actually, like, this is a slightly unrelated term, but like, if she works for someone who's like, if she is at will employment, right? Like if she's working at will, she can be fired for like basically any reason as long as it's not discriminatory. So like remember that, right? Like if she worked at will, and this is something I don't know, so people can go look into it more, but like if she was working at will, then like people can fire her for basically any reason as long as it's not violating like a discriminatory anti-discrimination statute, right? So there's that. And then lastly, transphobia is not just misgendering someone or causing them harm. All right? It encompasses a wide variety of actions, and often it can be boiled down to doing something which has a materially negative impact on the lives of trans people by virtue of the fact that they are trans. Period. So let me ask you, do you think that tweeting support for someone who has and continues to advocate for openly transphobic ideas, do you think that advocating openly in support of that person and their ideas, do you think that that negatively harms trans people? I would argue that it does. Let's go on.
is a lot of power from this community that seems to make the case that they are consistently discriminated against and they are the oppressed class. You know, this is a community that has companies such as Disney writing to our government asking them to make sure that they pass self-identification laws. You know, it's very hard to say that you are this weak group when you have some of the most powerful businesses on your side. Of course, this isn't the only...
Oh, yes. Because getting a large corporate interest to advocate in support of you means that you're not an oppressed group or you don't experience oppression in society. Let's talk about this. What types of discrimination do trans people face? Oh, wow, there's a lot here. So Rose just suggested that trans people are not exactly discriminated against or don't experience discrimination in society. So let's talk about it. Issue. What kinds of discrimination do trans people face, and is it limited to just physical violence? Rules. According to the American Psychological Association, anti-discrimination laws in most U.S. cities and states do not protect transgender people from discrimination based on gender identity or gender expression. Consequently, transgender people in most cities and states face discrimination in nearly every aspect of their lives. Just let that sink in for a second. Every aspect of their lives. The National Center for Transgender Equality and the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force released a report in 2011 entitled Injustice at Every Turn, which confirmed the pervasive and severe discrimination faced by transgender people. Out of a sample of nearly 6,500 transgender people, the report found that transgender people experience high levels of discrimination in employment, housing, healthcare, education, legal systems, and even in their families. Additionally, they say that transgender people may also have additional identities that may affect the types of discrimination they experience. Groups with such identities include transgender people of racial, ethnic, or religious minority backgrounds, transgender people with lower socioeconomic statuses, transgender people with disabilities, transgender youth, transgender elderly, and others. Experiencing discrimination may cause significant amounts of psychological stress, often leaving transgender individuals to wonder whether they were discriminated against because of their gender identity or gender expression, another sociocultural identity, or some combination of all of these. According to the study, while discrimination is pervasive for the majority of transgender people, the intersection of anti-transgender bias and persistent structural racism is especially severe. All right? Also, hey, this is evidence for systemic racism. 2 for 1. There you go. People of color in general fare worse than white transgender people, with African American transgender individuals faring far worse than all other transgender populations examined. They also say that many transgender people are the targets of hate crimes. They are also the victims of subtle discrimination, which includes everything from glances or glares of disapproval or discomfort to invasive questions about their body parts. In a 2008 resolution, the APA also said that transgender people are denied basic non-gender transition-related care based on all of these fucking studies here. They also said that transgender, gender variant, and gender nonconforming people may be denied appropriate transition-related medical and mental care despite evidence that appropriately evaluated individuals benefit from gender transition treatments. They also said that transgender, gender variant, and gender nonconforming people may be denied basic civil rights and protections, including the right to civil marriage, which confers a social status and important legal benefits, rights, and privileges, the right to obtain appropriate identity documents that are consistent with a post-transition identity, and the right to a fair and safe, harassment-free institutional environment such as care facilities, treatment centers, shelters, housing, schools, prisons, and juvenile justice programs. They also said, I know it's a lot, people, I know it's a lot, but she just suggested that trans people don't face that much discrimination in society. We're fucking burying the shit, alright? They also said that transgender, yeah, we have to get to this. They also said that transgender, gender variant, and gender nonconforming people experience a disproportionate rate of homelessness, unemployment, and job discrimination, disproportionately report income below the poverty line, and experience other financial disadvantages. They also said that transgender, gender variant, and gender nonconforming people may be at an increased risk of institutional environments and facilities for harassment, physical and sexual assault, and inadequate medical care, including denial of gender transition treatments such as hormone therapy. Again, based on all of these fucking studies. They also said that many transgender, gender variant, and gender nonconforming children and youth face harassment and violence in school environments, foster care, residential treatment centers, homeless centers, and juvenile justice programs. We're almost there. Furthermore, according to the I want to say this. I want to get the clue. I want to get through to y'all. United Nations. Many countries force transgender people to undergo medical treatment, sterilization, or meet other onerous preconditions before they can obtain legal recognition of their gender identity. Intersex children are often subjected to unnecessary surgery, causing physical and psychological pain and suffering. In many cases, a lack of adequate legal protections combined with hostile public attitudes leads to widespread discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people, including workers being fired from jobs, students bullied and expelled from schools, and patients denied essential health care. Furthermore, according to the 2018 LGBTQ Youth Report, 67% of LGBTQ youth hear their parents make negative statements about LGBTQ people, rises to 78% if the child is in the closet. 48% of LGBTQ youth say that their family makes them feel bad about for their identity. Furthermore, a survey conducted by TGEU shows that 16 countries in Europe and Central Asia still require sterilization before transgender people's identity can be legally recognized. I know it's a lot. People. But when someone wants to make the claim that trans people don't experience all that much discrimination because they're represented by Walt Disney in a certain matter and a certain part of advocacy, we need to call that out, because that is such a blatant misrepresentation that it just needs to be buried with all of the available evidence. So, let's go on.
Time that pressure has been put on in the literary world for people to disavow J.K. Rowling. For example, the non-binary power couple that is Fox and Owl, yes, that is their real names, left their publishing firm after they refused to basically bow to the whim of the trans mob. According to the statement, the clients decided to leave because we did not meet their demands to be re-educated to their point of view, and that is exactly it. All of this seems to be about making sure that you agree with the right side, and if you are of the wrong side, effectively you are fair game.
I love how she phrases it. Agree with the right and wrong side. I mean, yeah, there is an objectively correct side to this. She's trying to phrase it as if there's like, oh, it's just two different opinions, right? And, the people who have different opinions, like, we already beat this argument into the ground, right? It's ridiculous and it's disingenuous framing, because the fact of the matter is, when one of those sides is bigotry and the other is not bigotry, one of those is right and one of those is wrong. Period.
This absolutely terrifying, but this just seems to be brushed aside as though it's just the worry of the privileged, as they always say. It's the normal people who are most likely to have their lives ruined by something like cancel culture. J.K. Rowling is a billionaire. She's not really in any trouble of actually losing her income, but it's the people who agree with her that are at the most risk. And of course, this isn't the only time Rowling...
Actually, that's probably fair. Which is the reason why I think it's kind of ridiculous for J.K. Rowling to actually, complain about cancel culture, because she's going to be fine. But usually it is, smaller people or creators who end up, feeling the sting of cancel culture. So, hey, credit where credit is due. I'll give her, this point, separate from the context she's presenting it in.
Has been in the news the last week. I mean, obviously, the pink news are going to be always talking about her no matter what. But this is a fairly interesting headline. J.K. Rowling's golden handprints in Edinburgh have been vandalised with ... a trans pride flag. Now, look at that picture. Yeah, the vandalism is clearly not the trans pride flag, but rather it is the red paint there to symbolise blood, effectively saying J.K. Rowling has blood on her hands.
True!
That she has. Now, this isn't the first time that complaint has been labelled against Rowling. Jacob Tobias a couple of weeks ago tweeted, J.K. Rowling, I want you to know there is blood on your hands. By challenging the womanhood of trans women in front of millions, you are culpable. You have chosen to sustain a world where trans women are murdered with impunity. Once again, pushing the narrative that someone like Rowling expressing the views that she does immediately leads to trans murders. Now, I did a video a few weeks ago on...
Okay, two things there, just to rehash from earlier in the video. A, just expressing a view contrary to other people's does not in and of itself make it worth respecting, especially if it is otherwise bigoted. And B, literally, if definitionally, transphobia is not just limited to violence, right? We already have been over this. So both of those insinuations, both of those arguments that she just tried to remake, both of those are just objectively wrong. All right? If you need more info, then rewind to earlier in the video, because I am not going over all that information again.
On the Black Trans Lives Matter movement, where I discussed that the vast majority of the trans murders that we've seen in the US over the last 18 months have been at the hands of black men, and not so much TERFs, and not really people who would have been in a position to be influenced by, let's just say, Julie Bindel.
You gotta love that she tries to slide in that, the insinuation that because, black people are largely the cause of... And mind you, I haven't seen the statistics, so I can't verify if this is true or not. But you gotta love her sliding in, the slight implication of like racism or like black people being violent. You gotta love like that sneaky little slide in there. That's something I'll probably have to do more research on because it is an interesting statistic, but I mean, like, it's basically the same as, like, a 1350 argument, right? Like, that's essentially what it is. It's just, like, a repackaged form of, like, oh, black people only comprise 13% of the population, but, you know, end up resulting in, like, 50% of the crimes that are committed. And we will get to those arguments eventually. Believe me, the racism arc and the police brutality arc, those are coming up eventually, so stay tuned, fam.
These are really extreme views that are being put out there. This is not a cute gesture. This is trying to shame someone and hold them responsible for things which are simply not anything to do with them. Making the idea that if you speak out against the mob, you are implicit in murder.
Again, she has to boil it down to murder because otherwise she can't make this argument. She has to boil transphobia down to murder or else she can't possibly sell this argument, right? Because like she can't acknowledge that like normalizing anti-trans beliefs is possibly like equivalent or definitionally transphobia. Like she can't acknowledge that or she just loses on the face of her argument, right? Like she has to make it something as extreme as murder in order to even like even close to sound reasonable. And yeah, and the mob, yeah, like all of this is like most of it's just posturing, right? Like most of it, like aside from the arguments that we already addressed, like the rest of it's just posturing to try and make herself sound reasonable, or contrarily to make her sound reasonable comparative to like the opposition, whoever she makes that out to be. Was there an argument in there? I don't think so. Let's keep going.
No, that's not the case at all. A lot of these murders of trans people might not even have anything to do with them being trans, let alone them having been influenced by the author of Harry Potter. I find these to be absolutely ludicrous examples, and I really, really wish that the trans lobby would calm down with this kind of rhetoric.
Is it trans mob or trans lobby? Either way, it's just painting them. It's just painting like trans people. Also, can I just say that like whenever someone I'm talking to you, my audience, like people who fundamentally agree with me. I hope that I present enough evidence for you to be able to like take me at my word at least on some things, right? Whenever someone says something like trans mob or like trans activist or like any of those like specific buzzwords, most of the time, like the vast majority of the time, those people are probably TERFs or transmet or true scum, right? Like they're in some way inherently transphobic because like usually the people that they're talking about when they use those buzzwords are just trans people who are advocating for like the validity of their own identity and are advocating for like fundamental civil rights, right? Like that's usually what they're referring to. It's just the recycled anti-gay argument again. Yeah. So let's keep going.
But speaking of Jacob Tobiah, I wanted to discuss something which I came across only today, really. It's a few years old at this point, but it's so special. It's so special. I just have to talk about it. And I thought, why not fit it in with Trans Stupid? Because that is certainly what it is. Like, let's just check out this.
Okay. Yeah, this is what I mentioned earlier. This is her just like cringing at the gender non-conforming people. All right, so there's no argument in any of this. It's just her cringing at people who are gender non-conforming, like complaining or like talking about how it's hard for them to find people to date. Shocker. Surprise Pikachu face. So this has been the second time I have covered Rosa Dawn on this video or on this channel, right? The first time I did a pretty extensive deep dive into her response to Natalie, to ContraPoints. And I feel like I did that pretty good justice. I'm a little sad that she didn't decide to come on. But hey, Rose, if you ever want to, you know where to find me. But yeah, I mean, like, if you ever happen to watch this, I have my research document. It's usually listed, and for people who are watching who want access to it, it's listed in the bio of my Twitter, right? So you can go there. And I think that you should be able, hey, mods, everyone, are you able to access my research document? I think that we programmed it so that if you go into my Discord and use a certain command, you can access it. So yeah, there you go. I'm trying to make these arguments as open access as I can so that people can have that knowledge. Hey, cool. /doc. Nice. I love it. Yeah, so people can access it on my Discord. But yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, it's not too surprising. Yeah, she's wrong or she's posturing. I mean, like, again, this isn't really surprising to anyone, but I think it is important to be able to call out the arguments that she does make, aside from just, like, posturing and using buzzwords, and to make it clear to people why she is objectively wrong.